Hopefully this video doesn't go on too long, because the longer I talk about this subject, the more I'm likely to get in trouble. I'm kind of excited to learn that Matt Hansen of Obsidian has caused a massive uproar about Obsidian's new game Avowed, and mostly about his own personal comments about how old crusty white guys are running this whole industry and there needs to be less of us. And then you find out that he's been pressuring the entire company to add woke shit into their games, as woke shit is finally cratered and is just not selling. People, you know how, if you've watched me at all, you know that I blame gamers so much more than I blame publishers anymore. It's your responsibility as a customer and consumer to be aware of what you're purchasing and to know ahead of time whether or not your product is going to be shit. The whole don't pre-order because you're rewarding companies for releasing unfinished or bad products ahead of time. That concept of don't pre-order games has been around for like 15 fucking years. And yet we still have to tell people now that the entire game industry has been completely crushed by woke shit, by extremely unqualified developers putting out dog shit products even when they're not woke, outsourcing half the work to India or Taiwan or some shit, and it's just dog shit. The entire industry is in a state of pure competency crisis. Okay, there's almost nothing out there that wasn't made by some 5-man or less indie development team on Steam that's worth playing. If you're like me and you're a completely pathetic console peasant, there's nothing to look forward to. The industry is in complete crash mode, and honestly has been since halfway through the 8th console generation with PS4 and Xbone, okay? The whole thing's fucked. But let's talk specifically about Obsidian before I get into the dangerous content of this video. And hopefully this won't be a long one. I know I've been putting out too much long shit lately. I fucking hate Obsidian. That's a controversial statement. I know. They made New Vegas one of the most beloved games of all time. I fucking hate Obsidian. They suck. They are a terrible company, and they always have been. Everyone blesses them for New Vegas, even though they didn't really make New Vegas. They made a bunch of content on an engine they didn't create, with assets they didn't create. And they thankfully brought a lot of what made Fallout 1 and 2 good into a more accessible system and created a really memorable game. But here's a big mindfuck, okay? New Vegas is half finished. Isn't that crazy? It's about a 220-hour-long game if you do everything that you can really do on one playthrough. And it's half finished. Like, the whole Legion side of things has been basically cut. And the other crazy thing is the game is an incredibly unstable state without patches, which mostly are only available to PC players, pretty much exclusively. And a lot of people like to talk about this conspiracy theory that, oh, Obsidian was set to get a bunch of bonuses if they finished the game and got an 85 Metacritic score, which, by the way, Metacritic is a completely untrustworthy critic site. So is Rotten Tomatoes and everything like them. They curate in whose reviews, whether user or critic, which have you looked at games critics? Like actual publication, like, oh, the expert critics for gaming in the past, I don't know, 20 years. They're a fucking joke. Okay, everyone knows they're a fucking joke. Gamergate happened because they're a fucking joke. Okay, I'm trying to move on here. I'm trying not to get too off track. Okay, so they were going to get bonuses, Obsidian was, if it got an 85 Metacritic and it got an 84. Obsidian, on launch day, before patches released, didn't deserve an 84. It deserved like a 64. Fallout was almost unfucking playable until several version patches came out. And Obsidian, at least as it existed back then, was a very small team. But the way they sold themselves was they went to big publishers and say, hey, we can make this thing in an unbelievably short amount of time. Sometimes as little as fucking 16 months. They would promise it. And then they would deliver the game unfinished or very uncooked or in a very unpolished and buggy state. But because the game had good writing and some good mechanics in it, people were fine with that. Everyone loves Coder 2, even though it is a crushingly buggy mess. And in my opinion, I fucking hate the story in KOTOR 2. I hate Grey Jedi shit. That's a nerd rant for another time. I hate everything they did with the plot and with the Force and I hate everything about KOTOR 2, and I think it had a negative influence on the franchise of Star Wars. And they did that for BioWare, right? And LucasArts. And it was a fucking mess, but it was a gem, like an unpolished gem. Okay. And they made, of course, I talked about New Vegas, and it was a buggy, half-finished gem that, of course, was iterated on heavily by modders and became a fucking awesome game. It was a great skeleton with some rotten meat on it. And then here's the one that makes me furious, Alpha Protocol, which they made for Sega, again, on like a 2-year contract to make a full-on fucking game. And it was going to be The Witcher 3 before The Witcher 3. It had the most radical branching paths. You can have radically different interactions with characters, bosses. You could change the entire course of the game depending on where you go and the choices you made in each course. And there's radically different endings to everything you do in Alpha Protocol, and it predates The Witcher 3 by like almost 10 years. It would have been a stroke of genius, but really when it comes down to the gameplay, it was too fucking simplistic. The levels were very linear and forced hallways and shit. They couldn't give you a Metal Gear Solid type experience because they didn't have time to make that kind of game. But I've had to explain this to dozens of people that they don't get, that Obsidian promises you the moon, and it promises you the moon lickety-split in the blink of an eye, 2 shakes of a dog's tail, and they fail to deliver what they say they can do in a contracted period of time every fucking time. Now, since then, and you know what? Alpha Protocol I still think is a decent game. KOTOR 2 is still a good game. New Vegas is still a great game, but they're not what was promised. And this is the track record that Obsidian has. Now, think of that, and I'm sorry I went on a 5-minute rant to tell you how Obsidian was 5 to 10 years ago. Obsidian in the last 5 or 6 years has none of those people. I forget, what was the name of the fucking studio that made Fallout 1 and 2. I'm sure you old school fans who are cooler Fallout fans than me know that studio. That was who offshoots of that studio is what Obsidian was. Nobody from back then that made KOTOR 2 or Alpha Protocol or Knights of the Old Republic 2, or I already said that, or New Vegas, I should say, worked there anymore. And 5-6 years ago, they made a game called The Outer Worlds, which is supposed to be like a spiritual successor to New Vegas, and it was a pile of shit. The writing was bad. The RPG mechanics were fucking atrocious, and the characters were all woke scumbags, like right out of Dustborn or right out of Concord, years before that game came out. But that was back when people were still licking Obsidian's taint, and they didn't want to think about how woke and how terrible and how fucking pathetic, what a weak facsimile of a deep RPG that game was. That game was dog shit. It was fucking terrible. It is, in my opinion, at least in my experience, one of the worst games I have ever played, and I've been playing games since Frogger on the Atari 2600. I'm not quite old enough to have been there when that came out, but my first experience as a gamer is in 1992, being like a 4 or 5-year-old, inheriting my grandpa, because my grandpa was an old school fucking gamer from like 82 on back, and he had like the ColecoVision and the goddamn fucking, what do you call it, the Commodore and shit. Okay, he was an early adopter of tech and spent thousands of dollars on this dumb shit in the 80s. Okay, I have seen E.T. the Extraterrestrial. I have physically played Superman 64 rented from Blockbuster. I know what a very bad, very inexcusably bad game looks like. Now, is The Outer Worlds that broken? No, but it is that bad. But here, 10 minutes. So let's get back to Matt Hansen, right? Okay, so this guy who said, no, my crusty white gamers or my crusty white dudes are ruining the industry and we need more diversity in here and shit. The thing I want to leave you with is actually the reason why I wanted to make this video. It was not so much to say Obsidian sucks and is overrated. It's to say that it was not anywhere as good or as competent or as quality or as ingenious as you think it was in your rose-colored, memory glasses going back 10 years to 14 years now with New Vegas. You need to understand what is going on with the industry, and it's nepotism. And it's not just nepotism based on the woke religion, okay? It has to do with certain people getting into certain levels of influence. And people are becoming aware of BlackRock and Vanguard, and people are starting to learn who Larry Fink is, a dude whose name you should remember. But there's a reason why when you see somebody who when you look at them, and you look up their background and you realize their ethnicity, you realize why I don't ever say that ethnicity on this channel, because those people own Google. Those people own YouTube. The former director was one of these people. If you're wondering why Susan Wojcicki did all that shit to YouTube to make it so much worse, from the same group. So a lot of people are going, Matt Hansen's this white savior complex guy. This guy who keeps saying my fellow whites need to do this shit. Matt Hansen isn't white. That's the shocking red pill, the big twist finale of this video where you thought it was just me shitting on Obsidian and saying it wasn't that good, and now it's so bad that you shouldn't, as a consumer, think that if you're going to buy an Obsidian game, you're going to get from the makers of New Vegas. Because you're not. Nobody who made New Vegas works there anymore. The company is just a name. It's not Obsidian, as in the people who made New Vegas. It's Obsidian as a bunch of woke people and women and transgender people and douchey trust fund babies from fucking Southern California. But also, if you're wondering why this particular virulent kind, when you're of wokeness, when you're hearing that Matt Hansen actually forced people even above his pay grade to go along with the way he wanted things and was stressing race so much, and everyone's like, oh my God, he's a racist and it's never okay even if against white people. I'm not one of those people who's actually going to tell you all the time that, oh, bigotry is always wrong, because it's not. There are people out there who are out to get you. There are people out there trying to ruin not just gaming, but almost every facet of every part of your life. And you need to understand that oftentimes these people are not like you, and they hate you because of what you intrinsically are. Now, I do believe that even if I'm not going to be the guy who sits here and tells you bigotry is always wrong, because it's not. I am going to be that same guy who will also underwrite that by saying that, yes, you should treat people as individuals, and not everybody is a textbook example of their group. But groups are groups and stereotypes are stereotypes, okay? And whether it's ideological or biological, there are differences between us. And that's not wrong to recognize that, for better as well as for worse. You should acknowledge people for who they are, and also you should not always take people at their word. Matt Hansen is not white. He is a dude. And if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you'll know that dude is a euphemism from somebody, a certain group, that if I were to call them out directly, I would have my channel struck for hate speech, okay? I get a little bit skirted around the rules because I use euphemistic language and I don't always say exactly what I mean, but I do impute to you, I do imply to you exactly what I mean, which some people don't appreciate and some people find refreshing, and that is all fine. But I'm just going to tell you again, he doesn't have a white savior complex. He's not a hypocrite because he's a white person who decries white people, because he's not white. And like many people, he enjoys nepotism and enjoys rising up to stations well beyond his means, beyond his competency, and beyond his merit, because there are people who do collude to protect each other and do use nepotism and do refuse to fire people who are incompetent and promote people who should not be promoted based upon their race. Those people are not white. Whenever you see these kind of what leftists saying that, oh, there's all these rich people who run everything and they have this menacing way of enforcing patriarchy and this racial oppression, and they exclude others and they resist diversity and all this shit. And those people aren't white. The thing is, they're not wrong. There is a cult and a culture of exclusion in many industries. The video game industry is very big among them. You may have remembered another person that everyone was really mad at a few years ago, the guy who ruined The Last of Us, and everyone was furious about The Last of Us 2. Yeah, the guy who made that game, Neil Druckmann, he's not white. And if you're wondering why all that crazy woke bullshit was in that game, it's because of who Neil Druckmann is. You can tell me that I can't judge an entire group of people based on how they behave in an industry, but I can tell you that when it comes specifically to the video game industry, every single example you will ever encounter of somebody fucking up a game in this way, with this kind of woke mind virus shit, whatever conservative euphemism you want to use for it, these people aren't white. Okay? You can look them up. Or you could just look them in the face, because this word's hard for me to say, physiognomy, you know, the facial features. You may recognize this as a somewhat disgraced medical science from the past, where you could sort of judge people based on their looks. But the thing is, there's a reason why Nosferatu and ghouls and the goblins from the Gringotts and Harry Potter and Dracula and all this shit, there's a reason why they look a certain way. It's because in the past, white people dealt with a cult and a culture of influence and insidiousness and a hostility towards the host nations that these people found themselves in. And one of the things that you find out when you kind of look into the history of these people is they ended up getting expulsions. They got deported, they got banished, they got expelled from city after city-state, after nation after duchy, after kingdom, over and over and over again, for hostile behavior, for taking over and subverting industry and upsetting markets and criminal and con artist activity. And they just destroyed shit, oftentimes out of pure spite. And in the modern day, nothing has changed. If you're wondering why Matt Hansen's like that, it's because of what he is. What he is defines who he is. And the reason why he hates us and has this crazy obsessive desire to fuck with everything we enjoy is for that reason. It's that simple. And you can call it racism, you can call it hatred or prejudice or bigotry, but it's a fact. It's just the way it is. And if it wasn't that way, I wouldn't think this way about Matt Hansen's people or Neil Druckmann's people or Larry Fink's people. I wouldn't. But the thing is, this is reality. And reality doesn't care if it's ugly and it goes against the morals you were raised from a very small child to believe. That we should all get along, that we should all cooperate, that you shouldn't judge people by their superficial nature. But the thing is, I don't hate Matt Hansen because of the shape of his nose. I hate Matt Hansen because of what and who he is and what he does. And if he were to not do those things but still have that face, I wouldn't really hold the face against him. But I have a perfectly good reason of being suspicious when I see a Matt Hansen, a Larry Fink, or a Neil Druckmann, when I see them, because 99 times out of 100, I'm not going to like what I see. I'm going to be offended and disgusted by what I see, because what they're doing is hostile and vicious and racist and bigoted and shit. And this is what you're actually feeling. Okay, I know I'm going over 20 minutes, but there's a moral lesson here. When you feel like you hear someone say, oh, the Overton window is shifted, and I was always a moderate, or I was always a leftist, or I was always a liberal, or I was always this, but everyone went past me. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. The sad thing is, what you thought was good was a lie to pull the wool over your eyes. And back in our day, especially anybody over the age of 30, they were a lot better liars. And they were a lot more reasonable. And they slipped in the subversion very subtly, very gently. And oftentimes it went down with a spoonful of sugar easy. Oh yeah, let's just be accepting. Let's just let these people in. Let's just, mix cultures, and hey, let's abandon our identity to the point that our children, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, will have this bizarre impression that white people don't have a culture, and that we're defined actually by the diversity we experience in commingling with others. But then also now they're just saying actually those people are better than you, and those people deserve your job, and you don't deserve your job. You didn't work for what you had. You're a crusty old white dude. You're part of a good old boys club, and you don't deserve this, and you're ruining things, and it's time for new people to take the helm and take it away from you. And in fact, we need to enforce very strict social rules and gender rules and racial rules, and we got to have all this sensitivity and awareness and inclusion and diversity and blah blah blah. It's a fucking cult. You're right about that. But it's not just this directionless goofball mind virus mental illness. No, it is a weapon. It is a social weapon. What you're looking at, and you might laugh at this because you've mostly only ever heard this term in a joking term, but it's actually very serious. What you're looking at is meme warfare. No, I'm not kidding. I'm not funny. I'm not talking about like funny pictures on 9gag or whatever. I mean, what the woke shit is mimetic warfare. Warfare done by intellectual ideas, done by art, done by propaganda. That's what mimetic warfare is. Meme wars are real, and countries have been overthrown professionally by governments just using shit like this. Look up the Arab Spring. Obama defeated Egypt with fucking meme warfare. It literally happened. It's real. It's not a joke. And if you're wondering why everything you love, from every nerd, from video games to tabletop games to movies to books to everything you like, if you're wondering why it's being shat all over, is because people with a lot of money are waging meme warfare. It is a war for the minds of you, your kin, and your children. And they're not losing. That's the funny thing. People say, oh, they're losing. If this channel is so old that you can find me 10 years ago, prior to Gamergate, saying you can't just lie repeatedly and have nobody look up what you're saying and nobody question you. There's no way in the age of the internet that these people can just get away with this. It'll blow over in a couple of years. It didn't. It really fucking didn't. It got a lot worse. Think about 2015 versus now. It got so much worse. So anyway, I meant to really only talk for 10 minutes. But again, here I am saying I just really want to talk about this Matt Hansen guy. And I want to talk about Obsidian being co-opted by a mind virus that itself is a weapon used by a specific group of people. And that it is actually racial animus, but it's not my white savior, white guy who hates other white guys thing, because Matt Hansen is not white. He's not being a hypocrite doing what he's doing. He's being a fucking bastard. You understand? It's a different sin, and you need to be aware of that. It's not a guy betraying his own kind. It is an attack on you by a separate group. A separate group that literally considers you to be cattle, by the way. You're nothing but a toy, a plaything, a serf, a slave to people like Matt Hansen. You're just a fucking victim, okay? These people don't care about you, and they actively hate you. And it's not just a political brainwashy thing. It is a deep, long, historic thing, okay? In video games and movies and comic books and shit, is the tip of a very long and very old spear. Look into it.